Welcome to the Practical Growth Podcast. I'm your host, E.B. Johnson, top writer on Medium.com, published author, and master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. You've landed on the podcast that takes you on a journey into the heart of relationships and self-discovery. This is a must listen for those who are ready to overcome their toxic relationships and their toxic patterns. You can expect real talk, practical guidance, and raw and relatable guests that you'll be talking about for weeks. Let's get into it. Hello again, my lovelies. Welcome back to a new year and an entirely new episode of the Practical Growth Podcast. It is me, your favorite podcast host, medium writer, and TikTok educator, E.B. Johnson, and I'm here with an episode that is going to send you over the moon, but I'm not the only one here. I've got a special guest who is going to come in and blow your minds. We're going to have an amazing conversation about personal accountability. It's one of the most important parts of the healing journey, and it is one of the most avoided parts of the healing journey. It's all about learning to say, I'm the problem when you're the problem, and acting accordingly, leaning into shame, guilt, and embarrassment. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So make sure you stay tuned, because just before we get into that, I do have to give you a little update about coaching. You all have blown me out of the water when it comes to coaching. There's been an absolutely overwhelming response from so many of you. And thanks to that, my coaching program is all booked up until March. However, I am currently taking applications for the March round of my narcissistic abuse and childhood trauma recovery programs. So if you want to be a part of that, you need to head over to therealebjohnson.com and click on Working With Me. There you'll find a little more about the program and also the application. Now, I do limit these programs to only 6 people, and that's a hard thing to do, right? Because hundreds of you have been applying. So if you want to make sure that you get one of those spots, because believe me, some of them are already gone, you need to go ahead, get yourself together, and apply now. If you don't want the rest of this year to go down the way last year did, the way the year before did, if you want the tools to regulate your nervous system, to communicate and regulate your emotions, this is the program for you. This is a trauma-informed NLP program that, I'm telling you, fast tracks you to better behaviors, better beliefs, and an improved life and improved relationships. So again, if you want to be a part of that, head over to therealebjohnson.com and click on Working With Me to apply. All right, guys, this is the moment you've been waiting for. First big interview of the season. We are here with the amazing Duncan, who you might know from Boldly Growing Forward on TikTok and on Instagram. Hello, Duncan. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about personal accountability today, which is going to be a big trigger for a lot of you, but we're just going to sit down. We're going to make it through it. And it's all going to be okay. And on the other side of this conversation, we're going to have an entirely new understanding of what it actually means to heal, right? Because it's not just about pointing the finger at other people. It's about taking accountability for ourselves and the mistakes that we've made so that we can fix where we've gone wrong as well. So let's get into it. So Duncan, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Tell us all about yourself.
Sure. So turbulent childhood. Had a narcissistic parent, who had someone in her life that I got to go through a whole lot of sexual and emotional abuse. And that led to years of addiction later in life. I had to grow up at like 12 years old. Like I was supporting her as a partner, basically. And then she used me for money reasons for many years. And after years of addiction, being in a relationship for a long time, and that relationship really struggling because of what was going on with me and ultimately ending, I had to make some choices. And it all started with acknowledging what's holding me back from being what everyone tells me that they don't want me to be. And so I sought recovery, couple years of sobering up that led down to tackling emotions, acknowledging them, dealing with them, facing them. That led to interesting journey around gender transition, and then going backwards on that journey later, and ultimately where I'm at now is just I'm tackling the long-term effects of why I've struggled so long. Personality disorders occur from people like me, and just embracing that very honestly.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that I overlap with many people who either aren't ready or haven't figured out or have never heard the words like put to their emotions before. And I spend a lot of time in support groups, addiction, recovery, LGBTQ, and we all have a lot in common, a lot more in common than we don't. And I think that people do a lot better when they hear a complete stranger say what's been inside their head.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because it opens the conversation for them to let it out.
Yeah. I think that's what's so incredible about it as well, is that you're able to, like you said, like you're able to meet these people where they're at and relate to so many people. And even though you've come from such an extreme story, so many ups and downs, you're still able to kind of make that bridge with people, which is really, really powerful. And the accountability as well, especially from someone who's been through so much and has had to come to terms with so many hard truths in your life. It's like incredible that you're able to step up on this platform and just be like, yeah, this is me. This is what I've got wrong. This is what we can do better. Yada, yada, yada. I think that's really impressive.
Well, and the fascinating part to that is people's reaction is typically just like, oh my God, I've never seen such vulnerability. Right. Yeah. And for me, that's when I look at you. Yeah. So I'm like sitting here like, why does that impress you?
Uh-huh.
What in there?
Are people not vulnerable around you?
Right. And like, is that like, are you saying something? Like, are you trying to acknowledge maybe this triggered you in some way? And maybe because, jealousy is a large part of why we're reactive. And so I think people see that vulnerability and they're, like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. And then this is where I come in and go, yeah, let's do it.
let's actually put some feet on the pavement here.
Right.
That's great. Well, so that's a big term. And I think, that's going to be a new term for some people, because I think, people know what it means to hold others accountable, but what is it? What does it mean to actually to be personally accountable for yourself in terms of these bigger conversations, in terms of a healing and recovery journey?
It requires being brutally honest about integrity. So integrity is actions meet the words, right?
I love that.
And I think the part that really made a difference for me was when conflict comes up, when there's emotional reactivity, I shifted the dialogue from you to I.
Right.
Am I the villain? Right. Mm-hmm. And with addiction, that's what started all that. Was I went through AA and made the amends. And that's when people really told me the hard truths. And ever since then, I've just been kind of approaching the conversation over just like, okay, so there's a problem. What am I contributing to it?
Right. Right.
And that's really it sucks. It sucks. Like
it's uncomfortable.
And sometimes, it is, I am the problem. I thought narcissism was a love language, and that led me to narcissist tendencies. It did. Yeah. And when my relationship of 15 years just kind of hit that point where we couldn't do it anymore, that's when we were able to start being honest. And I started listening instead of reacting. Right. And it was just time again where it was me.
Right.
And so I put myself as the first person to address, as opposed to looking elsewhere. Yeah.
Right. That's a hard pill as well. I mean, even I sometimes struggle with that, because it's just hard to do. You don't like to say oh, I screwed up. There's no one else behind it. There's no other thing. It's just me. I was in my emotions. I just reacted without taking a step back. I knew better and I didn't do better.
Which shame, guilt, and embarrassment, right?
Yeah.
That's the pinnacle of our reactivity.
Yeah.
And that's everyone's afraid of it. Yeah.
How did you stop being afraid of that? How did you stop being afraid of the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment?
I said, screw it. Let's feel it. People actually think of it like validating for other people, mm-hmm. or validation for other people. So if I'm the one who acknowledges it, right, through the shame, guilt, and embarrassment, they feel heard and they feel seen. They take a wall down.
Right.
And if they take a wall down, then we can, start getting through that. So as far as man, I just really want to avoid these uncomfortable feelings. Fuck it. I just let them happen, and I show them. I show them that I'm willing to. And then they see I can do that too. And that's how the walls start coming down.
Right.
Exactly.
So you create a safe space for people to do that, because it's usually not, because you get more shame, guilt, and embarrassment.
Exactly. Exactly. And the most important thing, I will not weaponize it.
Yeah.
I won't weaponize anybody's situation against them. And that's very different from healthy accountability. Right. There's a difference between you're being a jerk and listen, this is how this makes me feel. You're saying the same thing with two different words, and that matters.
Yeah. Because one draws a line in the sand. One immediately, like I always tell my clients, neuro-linguistic programming, we focus a lot on specific language that you're using when you're communicating with yourself and when you're communicating with others. And there's some of that language that you use, it immediately creates an oppositional line, both with yourself. You immediately put yourself like in a defensive place where you have to react that way, like a cornered animal kind of thing. Or you can use more open language, which just makes the whole it makes everyone feel more at ease. It makes everyone feel almost more diplomatic, and like they can communicate much easier. So that's a really important point as well.
Well, and it's that word "you" that's a trigger. It doesn't matter how you look at it.
That's
it's
exactly
that word
it.
"you."
That's exactly it.
And I even like people close to me in my life. If they say "you make me feel" to me, that is where I advocate a little bit. I'm like, I didn't do any such thing. Yeah. You had reactivity to it, and I was the catalyst.
Yes.
Right.
That's like such an important point to make. Yeah.
Because it shifts responsibility, right? You made me feel, okay, well, you need to go sit in that, because all I did was advocate for myself, or I did something, and that's a you thing. And I'll go deal with my me thing with a responsibility standpoint.
That's excellent. I think that's the big puzzle piece that's missing for so many people as well. What did you do with those feelings before? How did you confront or avoid the shame, guilt, and embarrassment before you kind of did this radical kind of leaning? I'm just going to lean into it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to express it. I'm going to be it.
So prior to addiction and navigating the emotions, I would say if it was a relationship that was close to me that I actually cared about, flight response.
Right.
People please.
Yeah.
I will let you have this. I don't want this to escalate. And people would use that and abuse that. And I just, it was a cycle. When it was random folk or, coworkers, people with relationships I care a little bit less about, the amount of the word "you" I would use, it was never my fault.
Yeah. Okay.
It was deflection, 100%. Right. It was digging deep, grasping at straws, reconstructing the situation. Basically anything to prevent me from being, I'm the issue, because I need to be the victim, because if I'm the victim, then I can hate you, or I can belittle you.
You can also push things around a bit better in your favor.
And it feels good, right? It's a dopamine release to have a sense of justice. And for people with narcissistic tendencies or a product of narcissism, that's really hard line for people to even start to grasp.
Oh yeah. Big time. I that was probably, I don't know. I was a bit of column A, column B. Like I came out of like the narcissistic environment so hammered with everything being my fault and me being like an absolute worthless piece of shit, essentially in every aspect of my life, that I was like, I am always the problem. I am always the problem. But it was also at that same time, which I had learned from my mother, is like when it was someone I didn't care about, I could shift it. And it was like, no, it's you. You are all the problems.
Right. And we try to force people to treat us how we see us in our heads. Yeah. There's a strong attachment to that. Right. Because it's a lot. It's a feeling of loss if that doesn't happen. Sure. I think exactly 100%. It's yeah. I'm trying to put the words to how I want to think about that. So I'll circle back to it. But like that just kind of unlocks something. Anyways. Yeah. It's always there. She always rears her ugly head. So obviously both of us, a lot of this like reluctance to take accountability and unwillingness, inability to kind of be personally accountable. A lot of that came from the examples that we had. Like we just never, that was what we learned. Like that was how we had to protect ourselves, or we saw people that did that. So I know that you had some really heinous adult examples, and some of that will have absolutely been picked up from the adults in your life. So as you were you're still becoming yourself and all of these things, but how did you kind of pick up on that? How did you figure out that that's what had to happen when you didn't have those examples? Like, how did you come to that for yourself? In terms of what
like
exactly?
Being accountable for like leaning into that discomfort or being accountable for yourself.
You know what it was? It was one day, the relationship I was in, my ex, she said something that struck a nerve in a very different way for the first time. So my mother was my abuser, right?
Right.
And, I was the victim of that abuse for a very long time, and shifting responsibility and all of that. And a lot of that is valid for her to take ownership of. But one day she said, "You remind me of your mother." and that, because I had been 2 years sober at that point. And she was very accommodating to, me being sober and working through that. But just like one day, like I started demonstrating behaviors that reminded her of her. And she just literally called me out on it for what it was. And that was my trigger to be like, oh my God, I'm about to put my kids through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to take a step back because one of the reasons I sobered up was because of my kids.
Right.
I wasn't giving them an experience that was that they were gonna like, and I needed to break that cycle. And so she just told me another cycle I was continuing. Yeah. And other people in my life call me out on that too. So one of the things that she really affected was my perception of holidays. Okay. I hate holidays because that was like the abuse fuel.
Yeah. Right? Drama. Yep.
Birthdays and Christmas. Right.
Yep.
And to this day, I still have reactivity to those, and people close to me, they go, "So you're still giving her credit for that." Right. But it's a valid statement. It's like, I'm sitting here going, yeah.
Oh my God, that just hit me in the sideways in the back of the head. Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. and so that's part of the overcoming it and figuring out from a healing aspect. There's giving it space, and then there's continuing to give them the power, continuing to let them affect you. And that's hard because it requires you letting that go.
Correct. Yeah. That's like one of the big shifts that happens between that victim mindset to that I'm a survivor mindset. Like, I'm not going to wallow in this anymore. I'm going to be different. I'm going to acknowledge what happened to me, hold the people like involved accountable, hold myself accountable, but like, it's going to change. That's part of that big shift.
Well, and what I've noticed with healing journeys is a lot of people build their entire identity around that victimization. Right. In my healing journey, I realized how hurt I was, and then they stop. Yeah. They don't go further. It's like, okay, so like you're hurt. Now what? Yeah. Like, do you want to be hurt forever? And they go,
how are you going to feel better?
Right. And they circle around it and circle around it and circle around it. And I think that triggers a little bit of an addiction mindset too, right? Because you get that dopamine release because of the validation.
Absolutely.
I think if I hadn't gone through addiction recovery, I wouldn't have been able to go through the emotions and accountability.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just because of all the extra walls that the addiction put up around everything for you?
My understanding of how our addiction system works.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can see it in so many aspects, right? Addiction's not just substances, but a dopamine release to make you feel good. And then we become increasingly desensitized to it the more we do it, which is how you see these large concepts of victimization at a larger scale and people being louder and louder and louder about that victimization that feeds an addiction, or it feeds a narcissism. Yeah. It's one of the two, or it's both, but it's a reality.
I would say it's probably both at the same time. Both. We see it. It's really alarming because I was a teacher for a while, and I did a lot of like athletic coaching in the schools and things. And it was almost like you started to see this pain Olympics happening. Like, everybody wanted to be the biggest victim. They wanted to have the biggest pain point. And it was like this attention that they could get. And once they had that attention, they had like the power of a captive audience, and people willing to do things for them and a lot more central space for themselves. And for a lot of them, you could just see that addiction as they were growing into these people that went out into the world with this mindset of, I'm a victim, everything bad happens to me and everything else is at fault and everybody else should fix it for me.
Well, and then take what also the addiction trigger does. So if you're used to that dopamine release, right? Getting high or drunk all the time is the equivalent to how people can translate it if they haven't dealt with it. What happens when you don't get to do it, right? It's a night you can't get your fix. Yeah. Because our body is dependent on that dopamine release, we have an extreme reaction, almost a pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when people are in the oppression Olympics and the victimization Olympics, if someone else comes and tries to usurp them, they get a little bit more validation from other people. They get a little bit more attention. It triggers that extreme reactivity to it of just like, I'm not getting my dopamine fix from this.
Right.
And now I'm overreactive.
That's so fascinating. I didn't even think of it in terms of like what happens with addiction, which I should have, because it's obviously all tied into these brain chemicals and all these neurological processes and stuff. So that's just absolutely, it just all makes sense. It all makes sense when you just look at the pattern and the people who fall into these patterns and what happens to us.
Well, and when I say this to people, they get triggered, right?
Yeah.
Addiction's not a problem. I mean, it is a problem, but it's not a prison sentence, right?
Yes,
and it's really hard to tackle. But when you get control of it, man, does it feel getting a dopamine release from overcoming the triggers, right? Yeah. It's powerful, and it requires just a lot more living in emotions and living in accountability. And
yeah, but
that's why I'm passionate about it.
That's such a hard thing to do. What do you think was the hardest aspect for you for doing that? Like, what was the single hardest aspect of kind of just leaning in all in for yourself and doing this kind of this deep work? 'Cause I mean, you've had to do deep internal work to come to all of these understandings, all of these connections, all of this. So what was the hardest part of that?
Yeah. The fact that who I was in my head was completely wrong.
Right.
My entire identity that I had delusionally given myself.
Right.
Completely wrong. And it's why I have a personality disorder. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance to be genuine and to just kind of one day realize like I am messed up.
Yeah.
Yes, it was sad, but it's like a grieving process, right? Yeah. You realize that you lost what you thought you were.
100%.
And just like any other grieving process, you have to work through the cycles. And I think the part that I struggled with the most was that villain word.
Yeah.
The more people told me how I made them feel, the harder it was for me to find value in myself. And I definitely hit like a really big depressive point about a year into sobriety.
Right.
And I just had to keep telling myself, you know what? It's a product of how I grew up. It's a product of what I went through, and I can change that. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So then how have you come to the point now? Because you're obviously much happier than you were. So how did you get to the point where you were able to kind of like reconcile that quote unquote villain?
Yep.
And this great part of yourself that's doing all this amazing work and is just such a like honest, candid, amazing person who's just like really tackling all the crap that needs to be tackled that none of us have the guts to tackle. Like, how did you reconcile those two people?
That's kind of why I help people with healing. That's almost my
penance.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's knowing that I'm converting what I went through, which is a negative energy. I'm converting that into something helpful for others.
Right.
That's why most people who go through addiction, they become sponsors and such. It's because they just want other people to see their light. Yeah. And yes, it can be considered a selfish act to do that. But I mean, considering everything I went through, if the worst thing about me is that I really, really like to see people live in their light and work through the same stuff that I struggled with. Yeah. Fine. I'll take it. Right. I
think that's where our like narcissistic tendencies actually kind of deviate into, ironically, the opposite, where we actually become like an empathetic human being. So it's like, yes, you can get that human recognition that you want of just like doing good. Right. But also you're genuinely making conditions better for the future for people.
Right.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I like as well that you acknowledge that most people that end up in these spots are people that, you know, it's kind of a penance of sorts. Like you've been to rock bottom, and along the way, you've done a lot of things that you aren't proud of, and you want other people to not do that, to not experience that, to not suffer that, to not launch it onto other people. You know, that's extremely admirable.
Well, and what I've noticed about, because healing coaches have become a big thing
Oh my God.
Everyone who's ever had a bad day can be a healing coach now.
Don't get me started. That's another podcast episode.
Right. And there's even a boundary with helping people, that virtuousness of it, because too much addiction, right? Too much of anything is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And that's why I focus really hard on the addiction aspect is like, listen, you can spend all your time feeling good about helping people, but like if you're overshadowing that you still haven't got there, all you're doing is you're shifting your focus as a distraction. You still aren't sitting with yourself.
Yeah, you're not actually doing the work. You're just telling other people to do the work.
Right, which is just feeding a dopamine fix.
Yeah. Very, very, very important. So how have the people around you responded to this new kind of like radically accountable version of yourself?
So I don't have a lot of people from my past in my life anymore because of decisions I made. Right. And I think that's another big thing is people need to, these are decisions we made. Yeah. Right. But no, like I didn't know what I was doing. Nope. Like you consciously woke up that day and you consciously spoke your spoke and you consciously rejected accountability. Right. Yeah. So the person I was in a relationship the longest, we're still on, amazingly good terms because we're co-parents to our kids, but like she struggles the most because she wishes that, I had learned this 15 years ago.
Right.
And she sees how I am now after she's emotionally moved on. Mm-hmm. And it hurts her. Oh. And I just have to accept that. Right. Yeah. Like, there's no reconciling it because there's just so much resentment and it's just not going to happen. Yeah. And so coming to terms with, it's almost like a guilt trip for me, in the sense that just like, I'll be this way now and I'll see the reaction to it, that little bit of bitterness to it. Like, why wasn't I good enough for that to happen? And I just got to sit in it. We openly communicate. Other people,
that must be the biggest help is just kind of like being open, keeping it all out on the table while you go through this. Well,
and all we do is we talk about how we feel about it. Right. We don't argue it. We don't try to, convince the other person they're seeing it through a wrong lens. Right. It's just like, I feel guilty and I can wish all I want, but it is what it is. All I can do is hope that my version of myself I am today is something that can be in your life. And then she goes, I acknowledge what you're saying. I really do. It does hurt to see you. It hurts and it's awesome. Yeah. like she does care about me as, a best friend. And that's good to see. Just like the romantic aspect, I created issues for her. Right. That's fine. Yeah. It's healthy to just acknowledge that and be okay with it. Mm-hmm. And not every problem can be fixed.
No, that's very, very true. Do you think that even though it's hard, even though it's not what either of you foresaw or necessarily what you wanted, do you think that the relationship is in a better, healthier state today just because you both have this kind of honesty?
Yeah, because we can be honest.
Yeah.
We aren't afraid we're not afraid of shame, guilt, and embarrassment. Like we both hit our low points and we both got through that. And how that looks to other people can be a little bit scary sometimes because they're just like, you're not afraid that they're going to use that against you. And it's like, that's part of trust, it's a risk, but keeping the suppression down. Which risk do I want? Do I want the risk of being hurt because it's going to be used against me? Or do I want the risk of shutting down and going down a cycle and rejecting someone in my life
that you really, value and love?
Exactly.
Yeah. What about the work that you do? Has it always been centered? Has this kind of like accountability always been at the core of it? Or how has it affected your work? How does it guide your work?
It puts, I think accountability is quite literally the foundation of everything I do. Yeah. Because the only thing I can control is my side of the street. Mm-hmm. And
so important. I don't think people realize that.
Exactly. Like, we're really obsessed with looking outside, right? Here's the problem with you, this, that, and the other thing. Mm-hmm. okay, even if those are problems, how is it making you the problem? And I'm not even going to ever be at this place of perfect or, make a good decision every time. At least I'm doing it with integrity.
Yeah.
Like I feel more free and the weight's lifted that I am a person of integrity above all else.
That's the right thing.
Right. Exactly. Like I may fuck up. I may cross some lines. I may disrespect boundaries. I may cycle back, but at least taking accountability of it, I have the integrity behind it.
What you said there was so important as well. I may cycle back. And this is why I tried to tell, because, I've got CPTSD. Most of my clients, readers, they're dealing with some kind of personality disorder or CPTSD or PTSD or, generalized anxiety disorder. And I try to tell them, like, for people like us, the goal is not to magically wipe the slate clean and magically just become this all around wonderful person that gets it all right all the time. Like, that's not going to happen. We're going to go back into lows and highs. It's just going to happen. And part of being quote unquote healed or recovering is being able to accept that and allowing that to be a part of the journey and just learning how to manage it, how to be with yourself, versus this magical thinking of just, abracadabra. And it's just like done.
Well, and I think that component was a huge contributor to the transition journey.
Right.
I wanted to reject myself so much that I literally changed everything about me to avoid that. Right. I overcompensated.
Yeah.
I was like, that is a monster. That is someone who can fuck up. That is someone that people are going to see the past.
Right. I'm just going to wipe it away and make a new person.
Yep. Fuck it. Here's this new person in the world. And look, this is what self-empowerment feels like. And I was making content like that. I found self-empowerment.
Yeah.
I found a coping mechanism.
Right.
And that coping mechanism still led to me rejecting myself and not sitting in the room with myself. And I think people don't realize that, things like people pleasing and all of that stuff sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But it's a trauma coping mechanism.
It is correct. Yeah. Big time. So then what would your advice be if someone's like, right, okay, you know what? I've been doing this. I've been pointing fingers at everybody else. I've been in victim mode. I'm going to start standing up for myself. I'm going to look at me. I'm going to look inward. I'm going to look at me. I'm going to figure out where I'm the problem, why I'm the problem, and we're going to fix this. Where would someone start doing that? How would they start leaning into that shame and embarrassment and guilt?
Yep. The word I. That's it.
The word I.
Every statement. Yeah. I, me.
Yeah.
That's it.
Feel, I think, I'm experiencing.
Exactly. Because the second you do the word you, you're shifting responsibility. Like, or them, or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
And
so where do you think the line? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just that little tiny change, even if it's writing stuff down. I mean, it starts wiring your brain different.
It does. I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. Where do you think the line is for, let's say, someone who's an extreme people pleaser, someone who's come out of a really abusive narcissistic family, narcissistic, relationship, who has, let's say, they've been the scapegoat for their whole lives. Where is the line for them between personal accountability and the tendency to take all the accountability for everything? Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, that's what I'm unpacking that myself.
Yeah, me too. Are there any red flags that you would say, like, if you notice yourself, saying I in this situation, or if you notice yourself, doing it in this situation, anything like that you could kind of tip them off?
If you feel like you had to suppress something, question it.
Excellent. Question
that little tiny feeling, no matter how bad it is, even if you feel guilty about it, even if you're just like, no, I know this is me.
That's big.
Okay, why are you triggered by that? Like, dig a little bit deeper, because at some point you do have to learn how to advocate for yourself in a healthy way, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not a pushover.
Yeah.
I may look at myself as the villain in the first place, but like eventually I go, wait, no, but like, how was the situation of the person, the catalyst for this, right?
Yeah.
And finding that balance in a world where people aren't ready, everybody is going to use that flexibility to point it at you.
Yeah.
And navigating that component of like, I know I know I'm not the villain.
Yeah.
I know that this situation is an injustice and that I need to be reactive to it and engaging with someone who's not there or not willing.
Yeah.
Don't die on hills that you can't climb.
That's great. Yeah. That is the advice that everyone on TikTok needs. Everybody on TikTok.
Let them believe and feel and think where they're going to be. You're not going to change that. You know who you are. And that's the importance of empowerment with integrity.
Yeah.
You need to be okay with who you are. And yeah, maybe someone's going to shit on you. Mm-hmm. Fine. Let them have it. The world is a big place. Time is very little.
Yeah.
We all have a choice of what to invest our time into.
Oh, yeah, it's a big one too. Yeah. We absolutely get to choose. That's one of the big things. Like, you know, when people say like, oh, choose how you feel. Well, yeah. Okay. You can choose to put yourself in these environments, to take yourself out of these environments, to fight for these perceptions in other people's heads, but you're ultimately wasting your time because you can't control that. You just can't control that.
It's like paying a debt you don't owe.
Oh yeah. That's such a good way to describe it.
Why? Like, why?
Yeah. Don't go knocking, asking if they want money from you.
Right.
It just doesn't need to be done. So then what do you think that there are any like green flags, like good signs that you're going in the right direction and you are kind of like finally stepping where you need to step on this journey of like fully taking responsibility for yourself and living with this integrity in terms of healing and recovery? Were there any big aha moments for you when you're like, this is it? Like, I'm doing this right. This is good. Like, this is the right direction.
When I realized how much more freeing and how the weight lifted when I communicated the hard shame, guilt, and embarrassment. Like when I owned it, and I was just like, this is really embarrassing for me. And this is why. When I realized that got easier and easier and easier, that's how I know. Right. And then, you know, where the red flag is where you start going, but like, this didn't feel as uplifting as it has in the past. Okay. Why? Right. Yeah, and that's where you need to question things. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Always question it. If it doesn't feel right, just start talking to yourself, question it.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, something that I think a lot of people, it's okay to wrap their head around is because people of narcissists, good chance there's a personality disorder. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's kind of the outcome of dealing with the narcissist. Mm-hmm. Something that was very powerful for me, at least, was the realization that, you know, I was the hero I never got. And sometimes I'll literally envision that. I'll literally envision like me in a spiral moment, struggling, and the version of me I am right now shows up and has a conversation.
Yes. Yes. That's one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself. Like in terms of visualizing and kind of meeting yourself in the middle. That's like one of the best things you can do.
Yep. Because no one else is going to be that hero. No. Right. Because that's how you create codependency problems.
Real fast.
But how I like to think about it is, you know, we have different versions of ourselves throughout our life, and our triggered moments take us back to a triggered version of ourselves. It takes us back to when I was 14 and this happened, when I was 25 and this happened. The version of yourself that has done the work, that is getting there, let that person talk to that version.
100%.
Because that's all there. We have the skill sets we need. It's just we compartmentalize it because of the spiral. Yeah.
Yeah. That is excellent. I'll tell you what, that is like one of the best lessons that we've probably ever had on this podcast. Absolutely powerful stuff. I learned so much on this podcast. I feel like I should have just stepped back and just let you school me the whole time. Learned so much. That's why it's so great to like have these conversations with people. Yes. And there's so much overlap because we all see it a little bit different, because there's aspects that like you bring up all the time that are just like, all right, well, I was not ready for that. Yeah. And what I really want to see people get better at is being okay with these conversations. We're at a time right now where we have a whole new language to communicate mental health needs.
And we're trying to navigate that, right? Because we have generations who caused it. We have generations who are impacted. We have all kinds of generational things involved with that. And in this magical time where we're finding new language to communicate this stuff, it's important to find people who are okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and that's the importance of community, but not groupthink. Groupthink that's too far.
Yes. Oh, again, another podcast episode.
Right.
Well, oh my gosh, I feel like I went to church today. Like, I'm not a church person, but I feel like I just went to church. Like, it's just been completely eye-opening. Thank you so much. Where's the best place for everybody to find you? Where can they look you up and have more of these conversations, learn how to have more of these conversations?
Yep. TikTok, Instagram. I do lives and podcasts with people, and those usually end up on my YouTube, and it's all just under Boldly Growing Forward with the number 4 for 4.
Excellent. Duncan, thank you so much. This is going to be a life-changing conversation for people, and I really appreciate you being here.
I absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Wow, absolutely incredible. If that's not life-changing advice that every single one of us can use, then I honestly don't know what is, because hard as it is to accept, we're ultimately the only ones who are truly capable of looking out for ourselves. For us to get that dream piece that we want, we have to accept the responsibility and become the ones who are accountable for our quality of life and our healing. Thank you so much for listening today. Really appreciate it. If you loved the episode, remember to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. Everybody who leaves a 5-star review is eligible to get a free ebook from my shop. So all you have to do is leave that review, and as soon as it goes live, take a quick screenshot and email it to me, admin@therealebjohnson.com. And that's it. I'll send you a free ebook. For everyone else, remember to go and check out Duncan, Boldly Growing Forward with a 4. You can find them on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube as well. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, keep your heads up and keep your eyes on the stars. Bye-bye.